This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Charlene Aaron. Gulf Coast residents are watching Tropical Storm Barry, which formed off the coast of Louisiana and could come ashore as a hurricane. The storm could have relatively weak winds if it makes landfall, but possibly torrential rains. Mark Martin joins us now in our CBN newsroom with more. Mark?
Charlene, this storm could test the improvements that New Orleans has made in flood control since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Forecasters say the first hurricane of the Atlantic season could strike the southern tip of Louisiana Friday, with possibly devastating rainfall that could go on for hours as it travels inland. Already 8 inches of rain fell in just 3 hours in some areas on Wednesday. The storm left streets flooded and the French Quarter submerged. Winds and rains tore through homes and a waterspout formed on Lake Pontchartrain. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards has declared a state of emergency as the levee system faces one of its greatest tests since Katrina. Officials warn this may just be a warm-up for what's coming, and they're telling residents to remain vigilant. Forecasters predict parts of the region could get up to 20 inches of rain into the weekend. They say the Mississippi River could reach its highest level in nearly 70 years. Texas is also on alert, with Lone Star State officials elevating the State of Emergency Response Center there to prepare. The storm could make landfall somewhere between Houston and New Orleans.
With more rain in store for the city of New Orleans. This is the time to help us clear debris in front of catch basins.
We want to make sure that the state of Texas is doing all we can to prepare in advance for this storm.
Evacuation orders are in place for some areas, with mandatory evacuations underway near the mouth of the Mississippi River. Louisiana officials have closed more than 200 floodgates. Residents are gathering supplies and sandbags. Now, out in the Gulf itself, oil companies have started evacuating workers off their rigs. Charlene, back to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. And with us now is Weather Bell meteorologist Joe Bastardi. Joe, what can you tell us about this storm approaching the Gulf?
Well, first of all, this storm was seen last week. As a matter of fact, we have my company, Weather Bell, has a big forecasting presence in the Gulf of Mexico, with a lot of those companies that you just talked about knowing about this from last week. And it's very interesting in that you see storms like this during El Nino seasons or El Nino type seasons that tend to develop in close to the coast. We call them scattershot development in a random fashion. It's not like the big African waves that come all the way across, and we actually think that part of the hurricane season will be less than average. The big danger here has been set up over the last 3 to 4 months. We had an extremely cold and late winter in the northern plains with record snowpack and record late melt. Then it got very, very wet in the central and northern part of the United States. And so that water has come down the Mississippi, and the Mississippi is abnormally high around New Orleans now. Now, you start combining that with strong southeast winds that are going to be occurring later tomorrow night into Saturday as this thing develops and comes up into Louisiana. That pushes water back against the river, and then you have the very, very heavy rainfalls adding to it. So it is a peculiar situation. Now, tell
us, what can we expect, Joe, of the expectations of the impact of this storm?
Well, New Orleans is the place to watch. I do believe this is going to intensify to a Category 1 or 2 hurricane, go in near Vermilion Bay and right up over Lafayette, Louisiana, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, the center. But the big problems are to the east because of the fetch of wind coming in off the Gulf of Mexico, the excessive and heavy rains, and also the high Mississippi. This is not going to be, by Louisiana standards, a major hurricane. What it's going to be is combining with a series of natural events to form a big threat for New Orleans, and the threat that those levees, some of the levees, can be breached again. And that, of course, was the big problem in Katrina.
Absolutely. And give us a brief overview about how this year's hurricane season is looking. Any other big storms brewing out there?
Well, this is, we put out our forecast in April, Charlie, and we said this is precisely what you have to look for. In close development, right in our backyard, the waters abnormally warm in the Gulf and in the northern and central and western Atlantic, but it's cool in the deep tropics. That configuration usually means the African wave train is not as strong as normal. So this particular year, places like Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and Hispaniola, like last year, they got nothing at all. So the problem is that if something develops in your backyard, if it develops, let's say, off the South Carolina coast, it doesn't know whether it came from Africa or not. It will start intensifying rapidly if the conditions are ripe, and that may be what we have to look for. In other words, these storms form within 2 days of land. And you can see me excited about it. I don't mean to make light of people's misery. I'm not doing that. But that's exactly what we were looking at in the preseason. So we expect to see more like this. Now, whether one pops off the Virginia coast and comes back, or off the South Carolina coast, or in the Gulf again, we have to handle that as they come.
Just real quickly, Joe, how can residents and cities prepare for this hurricane season?
I would do every single thing. Well, as far as the hurricane season goes, you just got to be aware that there's a hurricane season, know what to do if a hurricane.
Okay.
Individual cities have that. By the way, Houston, this is not a problem back at Houston at all. This is all the big target would be New Orleans, Baton Rouge, as far as the configuration of events that could lead to the situation being so severe.
All right, Joe Bastardi, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The British Navy said it prevented 3 Iranian paramilitary vessels from impeding a British oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz early today, a day after Iran's president warned of repercussions for the seizure of its own supertanker. One former Royal Navy officer told Sky News that protecting commercial shipping in the strait was a challenging task, but said that the British Navy was well prepared for it and that it was important for British citizens.
The Royal Navy has been protecting British interests in the Gulf for many decades now, and so this action by HMS Montrose is nothing surprising. That is, in fact, why she was based permanently in our Bahrain Naval Support Facility. And fundamentally, there are a number of assets available to the Royal Navy and to navies in that part of the world. To counter them, it's very challenging, and the Iranians tend to use an asymmetric approach. That means that they will use a multiplicity of small vessels, and we are, of course, prepared for that. It's important to recognise that, that strait is important to every single one of your viewers, nay, every single British taxpayer. Anyone that uses gas to heat their homes, anyone that goes to Primark to buy their clothes, they are wearing the stuff that comes through that choke point, 20 million barrels a day.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard denied Britain's charges. The U.S. presented its case against Iran to the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna Wednesday, and it appears the world community is divided over a possible response. On Monday, Iran announced that it is enriching uranium beyond the maximum level allowed in the 2015 nuclear deal. That agreement committed Iran to a level of no more than 3.67%. But one report from Iran says the country now has enriched uranium at a level of 4.5%. The regime is hoping its actions will motivate the Europeans to bust U.S. sanctions and do business with Tehran. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Center for Security Policy Executive Chairman Frank Gaffney says he isn't surprised by the lack of European resolve to take action against Iran.
This is par for the course. The rest of the world is either assuming that we'll take care of the problem or, to varying degrees, complicit in the problem. There are countries like Russia and China which consider Iran to be essentially allies or clients, perhaps, saying, we can do business with Iran. All we need to do is just continue whatever arrangement is necessary to do that. And they're good with whatever the Iranians might actually be up to, despite the fact that it is a threat to them as well as to us. So I'm not surprised at the sort of lackadaisical attitude, if you will, but I think it's a powerful indictment, really, of these governments because they're either in Iran's pocket or hoping that Iran will be in theirs.
Frank, most experts say that reaching 20% is the real level of concern here because then they can quickly get to 90%, the level of enrichment needed for a nuclear bomb. So is it a bit premature then to be sounding the alarm now? Isn't Iran far from that level?
I don't think it's premature at all, Gary. The Iranians, we know, among other things, from the trove of documents that the Israelis brilliantly managed to sneak out of Iran, that the regime has been at this for over 20 years. You know, incrementally, you get a very rapid escalation in terms of the enrichment once you begin the process of engaging in it.
And I know President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, others are still hoping to get the Iranians to renegotiate the GCPA or JCPA. What are the chances? What will need to be done to get them back to the bargaining table, Frank?
Well, I think if there is going to be a further negotiation, it will be on the basis of the Iranians concluding that that's the only way they're going to survive. The maximum pressure campaign that the president's brought to bear, economic sanctions and other measures to really constrain the regime, are unquestionably having a very palpable effect on them.
So what should President Trump do now? You can hear Frank Gaffney's response tonight on the Global Lane at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. President Trump is hosting a social media summit at the White House today. Conservative media critics will be at the event, but no executives from the social media companies. Trump tweeted, "A big subject today at the White House social media summit will be the tremendous dishonesty, bias, discrimination, and suppression practiced by certain companies. We will not let them get away with it much longer. The fake news media will also be there, but for a limited period." The president will address the summit this afternoon. And we'll have more on this story and others on Faith Nation this evening. You can watch it here on the CBN News Channel. A Republican running for governor of Mississippi sparked a media firestorm for refusing to let a female reporter go on a 15-hour campaign ride-along with him unless she agreed to bring along a colleague. Candidate Robert Foster says he was following the Billy Graham rule and had promised his wife he would never be alone with another woman. The reporter, Larison Campbell, told CNN she felt she was being treated as a sexual object first and a reporter second. In a phone interview, we asked Foster if his campaign could have accommodated Campbell by bringing along another staff member. He told us the situation escalated before they got the chance.
She felt like it was a personal attack against her, and it never really got to the point of us trying to negotiate or work out those details before it went viral almost. I guess that it was an issue of me discriminating against her and sexism, and all of the feminists went nuts about it, and we just haven't even had an opportunity to get to the point of trying to work out the finer details.
Foster also told us he understands why Campbell might be offended, but said his vow to his wife and his faith supersedes anyone's feelings. Updating a story that CBN News continues to follow, the landlord and parent company of a Virginia senior living community have responded to a federal lawsuit filed by an elderly couple over a Bible study. Ken and Leave Hauge could be evicted if they hold a Bible study. They filed a federal lawsuit alleging religious discrimination in housing. The couple's attorney says the defendants met the response deadline this week and denied the allegations in the Hauge's complaint. The threat of eviction notice called Bible study class, religious movie screenings, and counseling sessions banned business operations. The court will now schedule a trial date. CBN News reached out to the attorney representing the landlord and parent company for comment. A spokesperson for the property management declined, saying they cannot comment on matters of pending litigation. We'll tell you why a journalist in the UK was sentenced to prison and the controversy sparked around it.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just hop on a plane and fly to a third world country and hand out food and medicine to the needy? And wouldn't it be great if some of those people came to know Jesus as their Savior because of your help? And wouldn't it be great if you could help out people like this all around the world every day? Wouldn't that make you feel great? And what if you could do all of this without having to leave your home or write monthly checks? Well, you can. Partner with CBN and you can help spread the gospel all around the world and make it a better place. And when you sign up for Pledge Express, your contribution will be deducted from your bank account every month automatically. It's a safe and simple way to make a difference. Plus, wouldn't it be great to get life-changing teachings every month from Pat and Gordon? When you sign up for Pledge Express, you'll save time and money, and you won't just sit around and watch the world go by. You'll help change it for the glory of God. Now, wouldn't that be great?
When you care, souls are set free. When you give, lives are made new. When you share, eternal life begins. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
A British judge has sentenced anti-Islamization activist Tommy Robinson to a total of 9 months in prison for contempt of court. He received 6 months for filming defendants in a criminal trial and broadcasting the footage on social media, and 3 months for an earlier contempt ruling. Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Lennon, was arrested and jailed last year for live streaming a broadcast outside of a trial of men accused in a Muslim rape gang trial. Joining us now is CBN News European correspondent Dale Hurd, who has some new information. Dale?
That's right, Charlene. We've learned that he's been transferred to the Belmarsh maximum security prison. This is interesting because his offense is a misdemeanor, and he's being sent to a prison that the British media has reported is run by jihadi terrorists. And this is causing an explosion of speculation on the internet that the British government really does want him dead. We'll just have to see.
The British government want Tommy Robinson dead.
Yeah, this has long been a feeling. He says his food was poisoned the last time he was in prison, that he purposely went into solitary confinement because he knew of plots to kill him. And so this is a belief that he told me in an interview that I know I will be killed someday, and they are afraid it's going to happen in prison, the British prisons being controlled by the jihadis. I think at this moment, though, the British government wants to keep him alive because it's clear that if something happens to him, all heck is going to break loose.
Well, that was my next question. You know, what do you think will happen if he does die in prison?
Well, I'm afraid to say, sad to say, that the judge in this case, Victoria Sharp, will probably need police protection for the rest of her life. It could take the tension in Britain to a whole new level, similar to Northern Ireland, where we see civil war and terrorism. I'm not exaggerating. This could ignite something really bad.
That's crazy. And why is it that Britain seems so polarized over this one man, Dale?
You know, I've thought he's perhaps the closest thing Britain has to Donald Trump. He is so polarizing. And the British government is obsessed with what it calls social cohesion. That it has laws that if you say something, even if it's true, and you're upsetting another group, you can be charged with upset social cohesion, violating it, or upsetting the social order. I call it a social pipe bomb that the government's created. Rather than addressing the grievances from Islamization and this multicultural experiment that's gone very wrong, because Britain's full of Sharia councils now, Muslim Sharia councils, they passed these laws saying you can't talk about it. And this is only making the problem worse.
Wow, certainly a prayerful situation. We'll be praying for him. Dale Hurd, thank you so much.
Sure.
Up next, we'll tell you where the fastest growing church in the world is, how Christians there are standing up for Jesus.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
It may surprise you that the fastest growing church in the world is in Iran. Yet that's the assessment of those who have seen and heard the remarkable story of millions turning away from the Iranian regime, Shiite Islam, and turning toward Jesus Christ. We've hidden the identity of the believers in this story, some of whom are Iranian Christians in another country. Here's CBN News' Chris Mitchell.
The image Iran presents to the world is large demonstrations with shouts of death to America and death to Israel. Those who have seen Iran from the inside, however, paint a very different picture.
You can't believe the images on TV because, for example, all the protests that you see in the streets, those are mostly contrived. There are young students in the streets, and they told us, if we don't go to the streets, we won't get our grades, so we're forced to go and protest.
We've hidden the identity of this Iranian church worker. He says there are two Irans, the one you see on the news and the other hidden from the world.
Yes, I would say there's a 10% Iran and a 90% Iran. 10% control the country in a more oppressive manner, hardline, religious manner, and then the majority of the people, 90% of the people, love America. They don't hate Americans. I think that's the message that Americans need to hear. They tell us all the time, we don't hate Americans, we love America.
He wants Americans to know that 40 years after Iran's Islamic Revolution, there's another spiritual revolution underway.
Awaken to the truth that we live in a time that's very special. More people have come to faith in Iran in the last 40 years than the previous 1,400 years. So there's a once, not only in a lifetime, but in history, where we have a moment where Iranians are coming to faith at such a rapid rate.
Frontiers Alliance International is producing a documentary called Sheep Among Wolves to introduce the Iranian church to Christians worldwide.
What's taking place in Iran right now is spectacular. It's the fastest growing church in the world that owns no buildings, has no 501c3s, that owns no property, that has no bank accounts, that has no centralized leadership, that has no denominational leanings, and yet it's multiplying like crazy. What the Lord is doing there is staggering.
And that results in intense persecution that Thomas says leads Iranian believers to seek prayer, but not in a way you may think.
Typically the way we pray is, we expect that they want us to pray for the persecution to end. And they say, no, don't do that. Persecution is growing the church. When the persecution stops, the growth stops. What we want is for the gospel to spread far and wide and deep in Iran.
With Iran and the U.S. on the brink of war, Thomas says it's important to see what's happening behind the Iranian veil.
When Muslims from Iran come in contact with the man from Nazareth, something beautiful happens. And when they realize that they've been bought and saved and purchased with Jewish blood, prophesied by Jewish prophets in the Jewish Bible, something crazy happens, something beautiful happens, and that's what we're seeing take place in Iran.
Thomas believes one day the world may wake up to find Iran's church growth in the 21st century rivaling that of China and Korea in the last century. Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Absolutely amazing. And after the break, American soccer fans are still reeling from the U.S. women's team's big win, how they honored them yesterday.
Roman soldiers destroy the Second Temple of Jerusalem. Centuries of eyewitnesses say the temple treasures survived. But where are they?
They went from Jerusalem to Rome, Rome to Carthage, Carthage to Byzantium.
Historians are silent about what happened to it next.
This is a bad omen.
Hosted and narrated by Gordon Robertson.
So does it still exist today?
CBN Documentaries presents a story of mystery.
Where is it?
Calamity. Most of the victims were butchered. And destiny.
The possibility to dig is impossible.
Take a journey to find Treasures of the Second Temple, a CBN Documentaries presentation coming July 8th.
The U.S. national women's soccer team celebrated their World Cup championship win yesterday in New York City. The team was honored with a parade after their win over the Netherlands 2-0 in the July 7th final. This was their fourth World Cup win. Team captains Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan drew the loudest cheers as their float passed the crowd. A lot of people were also praising the team's efforts on contributing to gender equality. It's suing the U.S. Soccer Federation for pay discrimination compared to the men's team. Go USA. And that's it for this edition of Newswatch. You can find more of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. You can also watch CBN News programs anytime on our CBN News channel. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here. Email us at newswatch@cbn.com or reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.